Hey guys, my name is Michael and welcome to this new video series on all things RC ballooning. In this series, I plan to cover what you need to get started, how to get involved in the hobby, flight basics, safety, setup, and much more. So let's get started. So why get involved in the sport of RC hot air ballooning? Lots of people have many different reasons why they've gotten involved, but for me personally, I was involved in big balloons, crewing and piloting for many years, and this provided an opportunity to stay in the hobby at a lower cost and still have a lot of fun. In addition, it provides opportunities to educate youngsters on hot air ballooning, build community, and just go out and have fun on the weekend. So let's talk about how and what you need to get started in this awesome hobby. So my first recommendation is to go and join the RC ballooning group on Facebook. I'll link the page in the description below. Once you've done that, you'll need to get a basket and burner system as well as an envelope. Basket and burner systems can vary in size and design depending on builder and application. Envelopes are the same. Most envelopes range in size between 2,000 and 4,000 cubic feet, but they can be larger or smaller depending on what the builder wants. In addition to your basket and your envelope, you'll also need an inflation fan. This is a gas inflation fan meant for outdoor purposes, but large electric fans will work as well, both outdoors and indoors. Just remember, you'll need a power source to run them. After you have your envelope, basket, and inflation fan, you'll need a few other things. The first is a tether line. I recommend 550-pound paracord for your tether line. This ensures that it'll be nice and strong and won't break in case you get in a gust of wind or a thermal. In addition to a tether line, probably the most important thing you always want to have on hand is your fire extinguisher. If you're doing your pre-flight checks and you're checking your system often, you should never have a fire, but just in case, it's always a good idea to have one nearby. Propane tanks can vary. Overseas, you'll see very different tanks than we use here in America. Most people overseas are using custom tanks that have dip tubes. Here in America, we're using your standard Coleman 14-ounce propane tank, and we turn it upside down for the main burners to get liquid. For the pilot tanks, in this specific basket, we use these blue upright tanks. This allows us to get gas for the pilot lights, and they sit in a single corner of the basket. You can use either blue or green tanks for pilots or mains. Just make sure your mains are upside down and your pilot tank is right side up. This here is a typical radio that you'll see for an RC balloon. Most baskets are 2-channel, meaning you only have 2 forms of control. One to light the pilot lights and the other to actuate the burner valves. Some additional equipment you may want to have is a tarp. Tarps are recommended to keep your balloon looking nice and new after many flights. So let's go over the basic cost of some of these items. For a typical basket, burner, and envelope setup, you're looking at around $3,000. This includes your basket, your burners, a radio to operate the system, and usually a set of tanks. In addition, like we talked about earlier, you'll need an inflation fan. A gas inflation fan is going to run you $350 to $400 to have it built, but you can build it yourself as well. For electric fans, you can visit your local hardware store to see what they have in stock. Just be sure you get something strong enough to actually inflate your envelope. Additionally, you'll need to buy propane tanks. Most pilots have a set at least to fly once, but many of us have multiple sets of these tanks. You can buy 4 of these tanks full at Lowe's for around $4 a piece. The blue tanks are also an option, as we talked about earlier, and their cost is about the same, $3 to $4 a tank. If you want to buy a tarp, I would suggest going to Harbor Freight. They have great tarps that work fine for this application and are at a great price. A tether line should be included in your system, but if it's not, you can find everything you need, including this reel and the tether line at Lowe's. You shouldn't have to spend more than $30 or $40 to make a tether setup. So let's talk a little bit about what you need to do on your basket and burner system before you start flight. Remember, this is my personal system and it might be different from the basket or burner system that you purchase or you build. You should be aware of what your system requires in terms of pre-flight checks and ensure that you are flying in a safe manner. The first thing you need before you start anything is a fire extinguisher. You should always have one of these in arm's length before you start anything with propane or open flame. Once you have your fire extinguisher, make sure all your valves inside of your basket are in the off position. Next, you can take your main tanks and begin installing them. Once you have your main tanks installed, go ahead and install your pilot tank. Remember, your pilot tank sits upright so you get gas flow to your pilot lights. Now that you have all of your tanks installed, go ahead and turn on the main tank valves. Once these are turned on, your system is now pressurized. You have propane pressure at the valves of the burners. So go ahead and look around and sniff check for any leaks. Look for any leaks around valves, tanks, hose connections, and make sure that everything is nice and tight. Once this has been completed, go ahead and turn your radio system on. When turning radio systems on, you should always turn your remote on first and your remote off last, meaning when I start the system, my remote is on before I turn the system on, and when I turn off the system, my system is off before I turn my remote off. Now that the system is on, you can turn on your pilot lights. I now have my system pressurized and my pilots on and a fire extinguisher nearby. Once I've achieved this, I can now go ahead and test the burner system. To do this, you should make sure that everyone is cleared away from the burner system and make sure your fire extinguisher is in hand. You can now operate the burners. Once you have tested your burners, ensured there are no leaks, go ahead and shut your system off and prepare your envelope for pre-flight. So let's talk about pre-flighting your envelope. When you get your envelope out, you can attach it to your basket. When attaching it to the basket, do a quick inspection of all of your connection lines, make sure nothing is broken or frayed. Additionally, make sure that you have your 550 paracord tether line attached to your basket and your envelope system. Once that is complete, we can pull the envelope out of the bag onto the tarp. Once you have the envelope laid out on the tarp, you can spread the envelope out to help with cold inflation. When doing this, go ahead and just do a quick check of all your seams. Make sure nothing looks out of the ordinary. Look for any holes or punctures that may have happened when packing up or during your last flight. Once you've completed this activity, you're ready to start cold inflation. We'll go over cold and hot inflation in the next video. Hope to see you then.